Well, it's crucial that net zero, to actually deliver our climate goals, is durable net zero. I mean, it's got to last. You can't just achieve net zero for 1 year and you're done and you go home. So if we're going to, what this means, to achieve durable net zero, any remaining fossil fuel use has to be balanced by safe and permanent carbon dioxide disposal. And right now, the only really readily available permanent carbon dioxide disposal option is re-injection back underground, which is what we call geological net zero, where you're balancing the flow of carbon coming out of the geosphere, coming out of the rocks underground, putting it back where it came from. I think we tend to talk about the continued use of fossil fuels as a bit of an embarrassing residual. People talk about, oh yeah, and then there's so I think what we need to focus on that and say, right, if we are going to be using fossil fuels past mid-century, how do we stop those fossil fuels from causing global warming? And the only way to do that, as I say, is permanent disposal of the CO2 they generate. It'd be fantastic if the aviation industry could acknowledge this, because then other industries would be challenged to do the same. I mean, at the end of the day, anybody using fossil fuels past mid-century should have a plan to get rid of all of the carbon dioxide they generate. They grasp the nettle of how do we actually make the business we're in compatible with a stable climate. And she is, very frankly, in the business of taking fossil fuels out of the ground. And therefore, she's thinking very carefully about, okay, how do we stop this activity from causing further global warming? And they're putting their money where their mouths are and actually investing in the technology required to get rid of carbon dioxide permanently by recapturing it from the atmosphere and putting it back underground. Now, what I found worrying about her contribution was just how alone she seemed to feel. You know, they're the only oil and gas company doing this. Why aren't all the rest of them doing it? And they're, in lots of conversations with airlines, but many fewer conversations seem to be about what they're doing compared to all the conversations that are going on about so-called sustainable aviation fuels, many of which, when you drill into it, don't sound very sustainable at all. You need to acknowledge the destination, and I think that would provide certainty to investors if we simply acknowledge the fact that by 2050, 100% of the carbon dioxide generated by any continued use of fossil fuels has to be captured and put back underground. To be on a credible path to get there, we need to be at 10, 20% by the 2030s. To do that is perfectly possible for the industry. To get to a sort of 10 or 20% storage rate by then would be quite affordable as well, and then you ramp it up over time. One thing is people say, well, adding the cost of carbon dioxide disposal would around double the cost of jet fuel. And it's like, wow, that's terrible. That's a huge thing. Now, the aviation industry over the past 25 years has more than doubled the number of revenue passenger kilometers it gets out of a single litre of aviation fuel. So the aviation industry only has to do the same again, and the cost of fuel per passenger kilometre would be exactly the same as it is today, and that fuel wouldn't be causing any further global warming. So I don't think affordability is actually a real problem. It's just because if we phase this in over time, we can deal with it. We can adapt aircraft operations according to, recognizing the rising cost of fuel as we finally use that fuel in a responsible way. Plenty of people are still asking really basic questions like, is this even a thing? We know how to do this. It's 19th century chemistry. What we lack is investor certainty to invest in the plants to actually do it, and clear incentives from governments. Governments have a huge role to play here to actually make sure that this happens. Both of those are possible. We just need to get on with it.